We are really excited to be here and to speak about cardiovascular health and present GHA and GHA's portfolio company, Elucid. Would love to start with a round of introductions. I'll be very brief. I'm Anna Neverova, founder and CEO of Phi Network Group. We work with venture funds and technical founders who are commercializing their research. And I'll pass it on to Gary Goldman, founder and CEO of GHN and GHAF.
I think that pretty much says it all, but sure, 35 years in healthcare, we're on pretty much every operator hat there is to wear. Started the Global Health Impact Network and Fund 7.5 years ago with the mission and vision of promoting active participation by clinicians in the digital health revolution that's evolving as investors, advisors, consultants, innovators. And we're happy to have one of our successes on the call here and look forward to it.
Sheetal.
Thanks, Anna. Likewise, I've been now in healthcare for almost 20 years. Started my career with pharmaceuticals, moved to US 8 years ago to be a part of the Stanford community. And I have been working with Global Health Impact Network and Funds as a partner and CFO for almost 5 years now. And welcome, Kelly and Blake. Great having you on board.
Do you want to start, Blake?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Blake Richards. I am the Chief Operating Officer here at Elucid. My background was initially in finance. I then led revenue cycle management and patient confidentiality for Epic Systems. I worked at several AI-driven healthcare startups in the strategy arena. Uh, One was in medical imaging, which kind of sparked my interest here. I went back to business school at Columbia and then worked as a management consultant for Deloitte for several years, focusing on med tech, med device, with a little bit of payer, provider, and pharma as well. I joined Elucid about 6 years ago after having been an advisor to the company. So I joined as CEO when we were two people. We are significantly larger at this point. And as we've entered the commercialization phase of the organization, I've transitioned to that COO role with Kelly coming on board as CEO.
Terrific. And on to you, Kelly.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, Kelly Wong, I'm CEO of Elucid. Been on the board for a little over 18 months, been CEO for a little more than a year, and been enjoying working with Blake. 30 years in healthcare, most of it all dedicated to bringing new modalities to physicians. Uh, I've been in dermatology, urology, obesity medicine, and now cardiology. Kind of scientist at heart. Got my PhD 30 years ago, actually back in the day when our friend Charlie Taylor graduated. He's the one who started HeartFlow, doing computational fluid dynamics. I was also he was in mechanical engineering. I was in chemical engineering, doing complex fluid mechanics myself. Just coincidence. Did 15 years at J&J. Other big companies. I ran a division of urology at Endo Pharmaceuticals, publicly traded. Ran a division here in the U.S. for Nestle in the dermatology space, and then was CEO of a public company, Obalon Therapeutics in San Diego. So really happy to be here with Blake and trying to do the rewarding and not easy work of convincing doctors that new modalities are necessary and benefit patients as well as the overall economics of the healthcare system.
Thank you very much. And since you've been involved with so many companies throughout your career, I'm curious what brought you to Lucid and what you've observed as a board member and now CEO. What actually sets it apart?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a kind of the strategic as well as the personal, mission. You're meeting Blake and the team, first of all, just an amazing set of talent and the technology that's really grounded in something that's different and better than what exists today. And of course, the idea that heart attacks and strokes are preventable, 90% of them, but it's still the number one killer. We do have a big key to that, to that solution. So great tech, great people, and the market opportunity is astounding. On the personal point of view, my father actually died of a heart attack and stroke at 52. So I was a teenager, and he could use this technology. Moreover, when I joined, I had my Elucid done, and our doctor was able to say there's no lip-eviction necrotic or inflammatory plaque. You've got no stenosis over 20%, so your flow is fine. And we've got your LDL managed below 70. He said, you will never have a heart attack in your life. To me, that meant a lot. It would have meant even more to the health system if he said, we need to do something because you'll have a heart attack next month. Because we know in the United States, for those that survive heart attacks, it's over $500,000 of post-heart attack care. So just an amazing personal value as well as value to the overall health in the United States and beyond. So I had to join. Great personal alignment, great tech, and great people.
Thank you very much for sharing. And I remember Blake and I met first, I think, in Zoom about a year ago. And my dad also passed from heart attack at the age of 68. And I vividly remember how much it meant what he shared. And I thought there could be many more lives in the world that are saved and personal experience. It's a very personal mission for so many people. I'm curious, Blake, just in terms of the innovation, if we could look into the technology, you've been with the company for a long time. From your vantage point, where do you see the biggest unmet needs in management and diagnosis, and how is Elucid's technology addressing those uniquely?
Yeah, so the vast majority of heart attacks and strokes are occurring due to plaque rupturing in your arteries. And that forms a clot, which could block blood flow and could cause a heart attack or a stroke. Um, what had been done for the past several decades in the diagnosis of cardiovascular disease was using what tools there were available, but we're looking at secondary and tertiary consequences of the plaque in the artery rather than measuring that plaque itself. And when looking at these secondary and tertiary consequences, what happens is that the ability to assess cardiovascular disease and the ability to assess who's most likely to have an event is severely limited. But even more so, it's not possible to truly align a treatment pathway to that patient's individual specific disease. These plaques are rupturing because of lipid-rich necrotic or high-risk plaque building up in the artery. And so when this company was founded, the concept was how could we, in a repeatable, objective, accurate, and easy to use manner, assess that plaque quantitation, characterize the type and amount of plaque, and provide that information to physicians. And so over the past 6 years, we've gone through numerous iterations of the software to be able to provide this uniquely histologically validated plaque quantitation, meaning this isn't just comparing to a subjective physician assessment of a CTA. What we're doing is we are taking CTAs where tissue has been subsequently removed from the artery and characterized by pathologists under a microscope. So it's histologically validated. We are assessing the CTAs and providing physicians with the most accurate and most complete assessments of a patient's plaque, which can then be used to guide treatment. So the innovation over that time frame has been pretty significant in improving our models, in rebuilding the software so that it's entirely cloud-based and can scale expeditiously. And then most recently, the work that we're doing to actually develop and launch our FFRCT application to be able to measure blood flow limitation. We can get into more details on all of this, but what we've been doing is really moving the needle towards enabling a more precise care pathway for a patient, not based on population metrics, but based on their individual disease to give the treatment that's going to give them the best possible outcome. And we've been supported by guidelines and significant reimbursement recently, which we can share more about.
Amazing. And Gary, onto you as a clinician by training, how do you think doctors, how would physicians be adopting it? Where do you see the hurdles or opportunities for physicians' adoption?
Well, again, I take a step back when I always answer that question is, if I've learned anything over the last 7.5 years of running this fund and this network, how technology has improved and the level of the change in technology is so rapid and the steepest the curve is so steep, but it's not just devices, it's also data. And with all these new devices and all these new techniques and platforms that are coming out, I mean, the amount of data is like doubling, like, every 68 days or something to that effect. And what we're seeing is that the future of healthcare is that data, how we use it, how we manage it, and how we treat patients. So when I first saw it, when we first looked at Elucid from a fund perspective, I mean, we're always, because we are a clinician run fund and network, we're always trying to identify these very early stage market disruptive technologies. When Blake and I first met, when we first started all this, I just remember sitting down with the team of clinicians and saying, wow, I mean, the ability to risk profile the actual plaques, and risk profile the risk of heart attack and stroke is just, we're not there yet. And this will take us there. And now with the FFR technology, it takes it another step. So for us, and for me, we're not only, we are now not only utilizing those studies, but we're also generating a huge amount of data that would be very beneficial as we treat patients moving forward. So that's how I look. I've looked at this as an investment, and now to see all this come to fruition and grow over time is pretty incredible, especially in this particular space, because this is a space where there are deaths and there are morbidities.
Thank you. And as like you spoke earlier about the product milestones and the roadmap, Kel, I'm curious now that you're leading as a CEO, what milestones are you working with as a company in terms of commercializations? What are the big hurdles and big opportunities you're seeing from your vantage point?
Well, let me just say that, we do see a big commercial opportunity to give what the market wants, right? So the market wants to understand if there's a flow blockage and the type of plaque you have. You have a company, HeartFlow, out there that has a decent flow product, but not such a good plaque product. You have clearly another competitor that has, a decent plaque product, not so they really don't have a flow product. They just give you a sentence that says likely or unlikely ischemic. We want to give the doctor the best flow and the best plaque composition analysis in the same product, and that'll make them, get to better decision making today, and allow them to kind of walk the path with us to precision personalized medicine, which Elucid is just uniquely qualified to do in the future and lead in the future.
And what would you say, what do you think from the doctor's perspective as you're having conversations with physicians? What would drive the adoption? Like, what are the hurdles what are the, bottlenecks that you're seeing today that if were to be addressed would really drive the adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see everybody today wanting that accurate flow products and a plaque characterization. The market is primarily based upon, do you have a flow blockage, which is a little late in the game. So you see the Lancet Commission, cardiology changing towards, like, we shouldn't look at, flow blockage ischemia being the entry point to the cardiovascular channel. It should be presence or absence of plaque. So today, plaque is more of a secondary. In the future, plaque will be the way you enter the cardiovascular channel, right? Instead of trying to treat LDL in the blood, you should just visualize LDL building up in the vessel. And if it's present, you should start initiating that conversation with your cardiologist. And then we're going to help the doctors understand, based upon the flow profile and based upon the plaque profile, actually, how do you treat Kelly differently than Kelly's brother, even though their family history is the same and their risk factors are the same. And that's where we're going, and others are not.
And I'm curious, how are you applying AI? Of course, we talk about AI application and data. Gary mentioned the focus on data, of course. How are you building your mode as a AI-enabled healthcare company?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, right, what we do is we create AI algorithms that see invisible features in your non-invasive heart scan so that your doctor can treat you in a way that you'll never have heart attack or stroke. I mean, that is what we're trying to do. So our plaque composition, as Blake mentioned, is the only one that is built on a model that's ground truth versus histology, actually taking vessels, sectioning them, staining them, and looking at the actual pathology of the plaques and correlating CT slice and histology slice over and over again to build that model. We also take that plaque composition and we predict an FFR value by giving the model the CT scan with plaque composition, so the model can understand the stenosis as well as the type of plaque, the amount of plaque, to get a more accurate prediction of the FFR, the flow result. You'll know that other companies, or HeartFlow that does calculations along a finite element mesh, which is amazing and it's fantastic. We think this is just another step ahead because it's not just the diameter of the vessel that matters. It's also the vasodilation capability that's impacted by the type and amount of plaque in the wall. And that is not taken into account in the computational approach. So we feel like AI is a better approach. And there's also many institutes that say AI based on plaque should be a better predictor of FFR. So those are two ways we're using the model, always coming up with different AI models and different use cases. But obviously today, 99.9% focused on plaque and FFR.
Gary? I think you're still unmuted.
Okay, yeah. No, I got it. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah, so yeah, Kelly, that's really valuable what you brought up, because when we talk about data now, when we talk about, I'm not, as everyone knows, I'm not a big fan of the AI word, the artificial intelligence word. I tend to use machine learning, or specifically assisted intelligence. But I think with the evolution of machine learning along with the data, in our lot patients together. Okay, it's not a precision driven system. And now, with having the incredible data that we're getting through what Elucid is delivering to us, it enables us to treat each patient individually. Yes, it's important, and I mean, it's very important that you have a family history and you have a primary blood relative who passed away from a myocardial infarction or some sort of atherosclerotic disease, but it still doesn't mean that you're exactly the same, right? Whereas now, with these kind of tests, we can deliver a precision level of care. And there's the genomic part too, which we haven't even discussed, the Elucid team and myself. But when you start bringing in the phenotypic information and then tie into the genotypic information, you start to really drill down now on the treatment side, because you get a group of people who have very similar genotypic presentations, and then you start looking very granularly at their precision data for that individual from a phenotypic perspective, and then you can start extrapolating which are the best treatments. Not every treatment is the same for every person. And the best part about it is now with this, we have a metric to work against, right? We're not just shooting darts at a dartboard. We have metrics to see how the patient is at any point in time. So it's very exciting.
And metrics that are inputs into the treatment decision making. So great idea
Exactly.
on the multi-omics that we have a lot of patents on combining genomics with plaque composition as a potential future strategy. And you're right, today it is really population health, right? Gary's looks like the Tempe looks like Gary's 6 had a heart attack, 4 didn't, and Gary's gonna say, "Am I part of the 6 or the 4?" They'll say, "I have no idea," right? But we're gonna treat you like you're part of the 6. And we see the competition still staying at that population kind of, health level where if you go back 20 years ago, it was just BMI and smoking were the predictors of heart attack, stroke. Then it came, BMI, smoking, then LDL and LP little a. And then with our friends and colleagues in the industry, it'll be BMI, smoking, LP little a, LDL, and total plaque at the vessel level. It's only get better. We just see the next step forward is, in addition to that, understand what's happening on the forces on a plaque, as well as the likelihood of the plaque to rupture, mostly driven by that lipid-rich necrotic core. That Elucid is the only non-invasive that can quantify. And then how do we prescribe a drug regimen based upon the risk factors this person has, or maybe they need to get that stented because there's not enough time for the drug regimen to stabilize. So that's kind of, a nutshell of where we see unique visibility to the personalized precision medicine.
And with that, how do you think about, you've mentioned IP and your robust IP portfolio. I'm curious how you think about the future of the company, whether in terms of partnerships, scaling, where do you see Elucid going?
I could just say, one of the things, as Blake said, they did the hard work a long time ago to get the correlation with actual histology. Our exec chairman, Scott Hennekins, was at Volcano and developed IVIS that became the standard for intravascular. He developed IVIS virtual histology with Renu Vermani, the pathologist, that Elucid used. So we have since coined ours CT virtual histology. Doctors know why they want to get a non-invasive biopsy of the vessel. And that virtual histology that we created has many use cases. So, the work that Blake and the founders had done allows to go to flow and plaque, and we can continue on coronary, heart attack decision making. We have companies coming to us about, hey, we think our drug reduces inflammatory plaque, um, and we want you to look at being a measure because patients don't want to get catheterized every year, right? Then we have other companies saying, hey, peripheral vascular is becoming a big need. Can you guys help us with plaque analysis? And of course we can, but we're just saying no because we're so focused on one. And then at the end of the day, the interventionalists are now, 2 years ago, there was just stents. Now they have lithotripsy, they've got drug-coated balloons, they've got stents. Those companies are coming to us and say, can you help a doctor, an interventionalist, determine which intervention to do on which lesion? Because they know plaque composition comes into play. So as we have CT virtual histology, we're uniquely positioned to go to those other use cases. The competition have done the traditional visual assessment of coronary arteries by experts as their ground truth. So they can't immediately pivot to these different use cases. I'll turn to Blake though too. Blake's got a tremendous background in all the IP since he was, I think, employed 2 or 3 here.
Yeah, so I'll just speak this from a very general level is we are the first and still the only FDA cleared that have done plaque the way we have. From the very start of what we were doing, even kind of prior to Elucid that eventually rolled up in, IP has been a significant priority for us and has been something we've established both for our approach, for plaque, for all sorts of things. What I think about is not just kind of the IP protection that comes from the histology basis, but the many different launching points you can come from having a histology-based plaque where you can develop and innovate in, I'll just keep it broad, more precise treatment of cardiovascular disease. And so it opens up all sorts of doors for us for expanded development, some of which we're actively pursuing now, that we're really thankful that that was the original idea of how we did it, because there's not some proverbial ceiling for how far you can go had we taken a different style of approach where it was based on maybe physician read as the validation. And so there are all sorts of different directions we're going to even further this. And so what we have now commercially in the field in terms of assessing plaque is a complete game changer. It's completely useful today in directing patients towards better treatment decisions in terms of understanding risk, in terms of planning procedure. But we're able to take this even further in the future, and we'll save some of the details for now, but it's very exciting times ahead.
Thank you very much, Blake. And Gary Shital, you invested in the company early. Could you talk about the early days of meeting the team and what gave you conviction back then and how you've been working with the company since?
So there's actually a very funny story with Elucid. Elucid was one of the last investments of GHF1. GHF1, already it was completely divested. The portfolio was decided, and that was where we were going. And when we came across this technology, we were like, we have to invest. And we were actually low on funds. We diverted some of the management fees and made sure, in our fund, the partners don't take any salaries. So we could allocate more funds towards investment. And that is how Elucid investment came about. It was not a part of the original plan. And we just managed to sign a check for them literally just at the beginning of the pandemic. It was March 2020. And we believed in this concept so much that we even followed up with the SPV investment in them a year later, or around, actually, I think 6 months later, we followed up, as well as the fund and as well as the SPV. So when we had taken Elucid to our network, the response from the clinicians on the network was a resounding yes. I mean, it's very rare that due diligence proceeds that fast. I mean, this was one of the fastest due diligence that was done, and with such clarity that we should be investing. We'll have to find a way to invest rather than saying, "Oh, we have already finished our investments," because that's what many venture funds would do. If you've finished your investment portfolios, you will not be. That is what you would tell the company. But no, we really, really wanted to be a part of this story and made it happen. And I mean, it's been 6 years now and no looking back. One of the strongest decisions we made.
Yeah, and I think also that I mean, our model and our process really validate the company, because remember, we're making our decisions for each company, not just, it's far from random, but there's a huge amount of clinical due diligence. So when we started looking at Elucid, and again, we were down the path already. We'd made almost, I think, 9 or 10 other investments at that point. We went out and we brought in, a team of cardiologists and cardiac surgeons and neurosurgeons and neurologists on our end to really look at this, and it was a resounding yes. And then when Sheetal brings up the SPV, that's where the real validation comes. Health professional invest in our fund, they're getting individual investors, but they get this risk stratified, diversified experience because for every dollar that they put in, they're investing over 10 companies. And that's very hard for an individual investor in this space to be able to do. And it's always not to the benefit of the company to have individually a lot of clinicians on the cap sheet when you're starting to raise more mature rounds down the road. But then and we've now proven this a couple of times, very recently actually. Again, it's wonderful to take this investment that you made and it was a good investment and bring it out to the network and say, okay, now you guys have an opportunity to invest directly in the company. Anybody interested? And of course, mostly what we're promoting it to is our investors who already have exposure to the company. And when, a large portion of them, there's a limit to the number of investments we can take, but a large portion of them express interest and go, oh yeah, I want a piece of this one. This is a great example for us of reinforcing the power team and a great technology like Elucid.
Thank you so much. And back to you, Blake. Kelly, what were you looking in your capital partners? I think, what are you looking for the next stage as you scale? Your capital needs are evolving as well. How do you think about your capital strategy at this stage and capital partners?
Yeah, we're definitely gonna, raise more money as we go commercial. And we think about investors, like Gary said, you want some folks that'll bring capital as well as kind of intellectual and network and help you develop the right path to go to market. I could say certainly there are firms out there that look to just engineer a financial return and probably not the right ones for us, but there are firms like GHIN that want to get great returns by building great healthcare companies that help save a lot of lives. And those are the ones that align to us. And, if they give the folks, as Gary said, that can help you understand features are interesting or not interesting, or this technology is great, but it just takes too much time. You want that honest feedback, and those are the folks that are, in the sweet spot of what we're looking to raise right now.
Yeah, I'll just mention we're very much a clinically driven organization. We're trying to help patients at this massive scale for eventually millions and millions of patients affected each year, hopefully saving hundreds of thousands of lives. But we need to do what's best for the patient, and we need to do what makes sense for the clinician. And so, in our board representation, in our investors, we do have a heavy portion of those that have MD after their name, that have worked in the space both as a clinician and on the business side. We just added Dr. Rick Kuntz to our board, who was Chief Medical Officer at Medtronic after his clinical practice. Several other of our board members are MDs as well. That clinical expertise is so important. and are probably the best judges of the products that are coming out because they know what is going to ring true to physicians. And so that's been fantastic in working with GHIF, both in terms of their central group, but in terms of the network of individuals we've connected with.
Thank you so much, Blake. And the team has grown. I'm also just curious, I'm sure it takes a phenomenal team to continue building. I'm curious if you talk about your team in addition to the engineers and just what kind of talent were you able to bring that's both aligned on the technical side, but also on the mission, of course.
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, we spend as much time on understanding someone's motivational factors as we do on their technical skill set. If your motivational factors don't align in the mission that we have, it's just going to be a lot of emotional energy on the company's part, and it's just not going to be successful for the individual. So we do have a culture of, collaboration, of innovation, and, doing it with the team. And that has to be part of someone's fundamental makeup. And then since, Blake has done a great job of bringing the, core capabilities, we added a lot of commercial capabilities with a head of a commercial from Volcano that developed, the marketing for IVUS and the commercial strategy for IVUS. Great market access person to make sure that we're properly represented in reimbursement. Uh, Clinical trial coordinator, someone that's actually going to manage a lot of these trials now that we're going commercial, and sales enablement, salespeople, sales talent. So a lot of these kind of when you start going into the commercial airspace that Blake and I are co-piloting, these unique skill sets are being bolted on, and they're being bolted on in a way that at least the early hires are been there, done that candidates, as opposed to folks that are really eager, because you want a mix of both, but we want to start with people that have been there, done that, and can help us build process as well as success.
Thank you. And I think everyone in this webinar room has been an experienced operator for quite some time. I'm curious, Sheetal, Gary, what do you see kind of the most underestimated obstacles that early stage healthcare companies are facing? You've had a number of companies in your portfolio, but what patterns are you seeing in terms of recognizing obstacles early and then navigating the commercialization landscape?
Uh, the one thing that I think in a very early stage, especially in healthcare, is like Blake pointed out, the clinical expertise. You want the clinical expertise from day one to validate the idea, to make sure that you're going in the right direction. I mean, the reason why our network was so bullish on Elucid was because they already had the expertise and they were working very logically in this idea. And it was very clear. Now let me change tracks a little bit. When we're talking about commercialization, yes, the product is still a clinical product. It is still targeted at clinicians, but commercialization is slightly different. Now we're talking about there are other obstacles that come in the picture. How are the logistics of making sure the service and the product reaches the right place, the utilization, the post support, the talent that is required, in which Kelly was pointing out very clearly, is a little different. Yes, they are still clinicians. They still have the clinical expertise, but now they also need to be somebody who have prior industry experience. And those are the people we need who will be taking forward to the commercialization. Another thing that helps in commercialization for a startup is having a great strategic partner step in early. That really, really helps because that can help accelerate to and make sure that your product reaches the market much faster than usual. Because this is somebody, a strategic partner is experienced and they know exactly what it takes. And it really, the guidance helps the startup quite a bit.
Thank you, Blake. Kelly, anything to add? Blake, I know you mentioned FDA approval process. I'm curious, what was it like? How do you think about the regulatory landscape, especially as it relates to AI? I think a lot of uncertainty around regulating AI-enabled devices, software updates. It's a totally Wild West. So I'm curious, what are you seeing? What are you nervous about? What are you excited about?
Yeah, so we've been through, at this point, I believe 4 FDA clearances for our plaque product. Um, when interacting with the FDA, of course, this is a ever-evolving landscape as AI continues to mature and FDA continues to mature its practices. But by far the most important thing is think of FDA as your partner. You're working with them. They want to approve great devices that are going to help patients. And so if you think of it that way and you interact with them that way and you go through the proper processes with the correct pre-submission meetings, with telling them this is what we're going to do, and then you do it, it's not as daunting as one might think. They tell you what they need, so you're able to follow that and achieve it. The thing to always think about is when they are going to evolve the regulations or the standards or how they look at these products, but they're generally giving ample notice for that. And at least in our space, there's been a pretty high volume of submissions using AI in AI radiology. Um, we have a different approach than most of those because of how we validate against histology. But I think the FDA has really matured in how to look at these, and we are supportive of their increased scrutinization and increased standards as to what they do approve. Our head of regulatory has been in the business for several decades, has led regulatory at, we'll say, similar companies in our space. Uh, and we're really set up in a position to succeed on the regulatory front. It's very different than reimbursement, which is kind of more the black box now. Regulatory, if you do what's expected and you do it well, you're going to have a clear device.
Thank you. And Kelly, anything from your side now that you're thinking more about reimbursement? Also, you ran publicly, you mentioned you were CEO of a publicly traded entity, correct? So as you think about the next 3, 5, 7 years for Elucid, where do you see the company going?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, well, first, Blake is absolutely right. You need people that are in the FDA process, swimming with the fish in the bowl, not studying the fish outside the bowl, because FDA are human beings and, they evolve and they learn, and what was appropriate 6 months ago may not be the same today. So you need to have that. And we have internal expertise, and we hire folks that as consultants that do that day to day. Then you mentioned reimbursement. Reimbursement is definitely a big challenge for most companies, and many technologies fail, is they fail to figure out who's going to pay for it, what's the economic benefit, even though the clinical benefit is there. We've been fortunate in that, as Blake said, not just FDA, but also government payers, and now the commercial payers see the clear health outcome benefit as well as the economic benefit of doing AI add-ons to non-invasive coronary CTAs. So FFR is fully reimbursed, universal coverage across government and commercial payers. And then Blake and I are really excited over just Thanksgiving, where plaque is following the same path. And that was about 3 years sooner than anybody expected. So just in November, 70% of Medicare eligible will be accounted for plaque. AMA determined it'll be category 1 in January 2026. And just a couple weeks ago, CMS did propose in their July proposal $1,000 reimbursement for plaque, which would be around the same as the $1,000 a doctor can get for flow. That'll be finalized in November. And we also see movement among commercial payers with Evacor coming along and looking at commercial policies. So we're real excited that plaque can get the kind of coverage that FFR has. And we're believers. I think most everybody's a believer that the plaque market will eventually be bigger than the FFR market, but the FFR market is absolutely huge today, and that's the primary. So reimbursement is absolutely critical, and we're lucky to be in that slipstream of positive reimbursement trends. And lastly, we have a clinical strategy to execute. So, we have this preview trial. We're going to learn about what plaque characteristics are important to understand lesion level rupture, time of rupture, and ability to stabilize with drug therapy. And then we have a series of prospective trials to specify regimens based upon plaque composition and other biomarkers, different regimen for different types of people, or personalized medicine. And then as well as predicting the time it would take for a plaque to rupture versus the time it'll take for it to stabilize, and then some interventional clinical trials after that. So these clinical trials absolutely match the product roadmap, but there's a good future of continual innovation that just benefits patients and is going to hopefully make our investors millions, but more over save millions of lives.
Thank you. And I think this brings us really nicely to Gary and Sheetal. Gary, you started the fund with a thesis of innovation, but of course, first and foremost, impact on patients' lives. And I'm curious how you think about just your mission as a investor, in this case, an investor innovator. How do you measure commercial impact, and how do you measure impact on lives when you make these decisions and then continue investing in the companies? It's a little bit slow. Do you want to take that question, Sheetal?
That was definitely the aim of this fund and the network when we started, was to ensure that we are able to bring in the innovative healthcare technology to the market. We can support it. We are not a huge firm, but we make sure that our network.
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Our network is actually our USP and our core strength area, which is what we also don't even just believe in investing capital. We also believe in adding intellect and support to the startups that we invest in. And also making sure that tomorrow when they want to commercialize, the same network is what we use to support them to find the right partners, to be able to bounce the ideas over an unbiased panel of clinicians and what their perspective is. So our core goal of furthering impact and making sure innovative healthcare technologies reaches the market so far in 7 years, I wouldn't say that we are made a huge impact, but we have started. Our impact footprint is definitely growing larger and larger by each year. And that is something we are very proud of. This fund was not started with the aim of, yes, of course, we are a for-profit organization. It's a typical venture capital firm. But it was also started with the idea of allowing clinicians to have a seat at the table, and as well as make sure that innovation does reach the market. So it wasn't only for financial reasons. Financial is, I would say, a beautiful side effect of all this. But it's making sure that the right patients benefit. As Kelly mentioned on his personal stories, how many do all of us know? How many people we know who have had a parent they have lost due to cardiac issues, cardiac arrest? It is so common that it is scary. It's really scary how common that is. I mean, whenever we hear some close friend or someone saying, hey, yeah, I lost my a parent a few years back, sudden cardiac arrest, we have normalized this. And that is not okay. We don't want medical issues to be normalized. And that was the change we wanted to bring in.
Thank you.
I think what I would add to that, can you guys hear me now?
We can.
Yeah, okay. What I would add to that is, so, it's funny when we get on these calls, especially, from my perspective, it depends on, I have to figure out what hat I'm putting on, depending on what I'm going to answer, because I'll wear a clinician's hat, and then sometimes I'm wearing a venture capitalist hat, and then sometimes I'm wearing a hat from the experience that I have in terms of taking a company and commercializing, right? And one of the wonderful things about the network and with digital health in general is that the impact that any one of these technologies can make is no longer geographically limited. So the ability to commercialize internationally is, for a large majority of digital health kind of solutions, much easier than it was 25 years ago or even 5 years ago. So for us and our network, we're yes, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors. The good news is all our investors are clinicians, so they care. They care as much about the social impact and the patient impact as than they do about the financial impact. But we do also have to make sure that the company is in a position where it is not worrying about the finances and have subsequent rounds. Now with Elucid, again, we're expanding our network globally right now. We're going into Africa and India and to the Middle East and Europe, and we, and the intention is that to be able to work with companies like an Elucid, but we work with companies from early idea generation all the way through commercialization and exit. So we're at multiple different stages with these companies, but a place where many companies have struggles with when it comes to scaling up the business is international commercialization. It's not as easy as you think because of the complexities of those geographic locations. And it's not just the reimbursement, but it's also the availability and access to resources that you need. So, it's a question that I actually, will put out to Kelly and to Blake, because it's not something that we've spent a lot of time talking about because of everything that's has had to be done in terms of, crossing all the hurdles to get where we are right now with Elucid. But what about the idea of international commercialization as you're now commercializing this project? Are you looking at that and starting to conceptualize that?
Yeah, absolutely, Gary. We're in the process of, on the plaque product, getting, EU CE mark, a UK CA mark on it. We have definite interest in people distributing our products in countries that it is reimbursed, mostly Japan and the UK in this case. Other European countries are shortly to follow from what we hear, so other people stacked up for that. I can tell you commercially, we're really focused on the United States ourselves, but we certainly can partner in the EU or and Japan, or wait till we're ready to go direct. So it's not the number one thing on our plate, but we're certainly keeping that optionality available.
Thank you very much, Kelly. And we'd like to open, I know we have some questions coming in the chat. I'd love to open it to a wider audience. It's exciting to have the team here. Everyone is very busy. The team is really busy. So if anyone has questions for Blake, Kelly, I think this is a tremendous opportunity to ask them questions. But in the interim, I think as we see questions coming up, you've mentioned something earlier, Kelly. You're being approached, like you're being approached by a lot of partners and a lot of interested parties in working with you on the commercialization, maybe AI, improving algorithms. I'm curious how what helps you stay focused in this journey. That's some of the most important things. How are you prioritizing your product needs, your long-term and short-term strategy?
Yeah, we kind of have an idea of what learning modules we need to, get experience in. So if you think about these Lego blocks of learning, if these Lego blocks that they want to do are on our learning path, then it makes a lot of sense. If it has to do with something like we talk about drug companies looking at inflammatory plaque, that may not build new capabilities for us, and we definitely do not want to become a contract research organization, right? So we need to focus all of our resources on getting to commercializing the products we have. So if people come with a proposal that's on the path to our commercialization and learning that we need to learn anyway, we'll work with them. If not, we'll tell them we're gonna come back when we feel like we have the ability to absorb that extra, kind of focus.
And I'm also curious, Blake, you were with the company now for a long time. Early on, how has the culture evolved over these years? Now that you have many more people, many more capital partners to manage, advisors, regulators, different stakes, and still patients' health is at the center of it. So could you speak about how you are building culture at Elucid?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're a very small organization, think 10, 12, 20 individuals, culture is pretty straightforward and fairly easy. You're talking to everybody on a continuous basis. It kind of just happens organically a lot of the time, or at least based on what the founder or CEO is guiding because of those many interactions. As you grow, you have to get more intentional about it and thoughtful about what it is. I think even as Kelly mentioned before, the secret for us, first and foremost, is everybody is here because of the mission. They're here to predict and prevent heart attacks and strokes. I think, and I'll say, I know a lot of folks on our engineering team could be working at much larger public companies in the vein of Google or Meta. They chose to come here over some of those roles because they believe in what we're doing, because of the chance to truly help millions and millions of patients, and because it has really close to their heart in terms of what no pun was intended there. But as we have grown, and the majority of our workforce is all local in the office, but obviously there's some people elsewhere. You do have to be more intentional. You do have to talk about your values. You do have to talk about things like putting patients and physicians first, things about being intellectually curious, things that are really important to the company, to its success and what we're doing. I think we've done, I'm not going to say we've done, I think the company as a whole has a fantastic culture, and you can see it on a day-to-day basis in the way people interact with one another and how they express themselves outwardly. Um, but it's something that needs to be kind of continually refreshed and supported and getting feedback from the people on the team, not just doing what one individual thinks may be best for the organization. I think at the end of the day, a lot of companies, culture is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing to sustain success. Sorry, you're on mute.
Thank you, Blake. Last question, as we get to wrap up. I'm actually really curious. So you obviously have a venture-backed company. Venture capital comes with very unique set of hurdles and expectations. And so how do you think about sometimes perhaps the trade-offs or the challenges that come with it for the next 5 to 7 years of the company's future?
Well, I mean, I think first
You
and
want to lead?
foremost, Blake and I say we just have to be the do what we say we're going to do group. So if we commit to something, we need to deliver it. And the more you get a history of your investors seeing you deliver on what you say you're going to do, the more liberties you have to spend the money and go do new ideas. So being venture capital backed is definitely not a hindrance. A lot of these folks, as Blake said, most of them carry MDs after the name. They can be very helpful for us in our strategy, in our networking with other institutions, and on the customer side. So we don't look at it as a hurdle or a hamstring, but it's definitely something you need to, the idea of like shooting for the stars and then if you miss, you'll land on the moon. That doesn't work. If you're gonna land on the moon, just say you're gonna land on the moon, and then it works out great.
Mhm. Thank you. Sheetal?
Yeah, just wanted to add a point. So I just also want to make the announcement for the benefit of our audience. GHF2 is also planning to invest in Elucid. The whole idea of why we brought GHF2 into existence after the first fund was many of our portfolio companies, they were reaching advanced stages. Like when we invested first in Elucid, it was in the seed round. And we've been seeing their growth over the 6 years. Same goes for another couple of our portfolio companies. So GHF2, the philosophy of the fund, it's similar thesis to Fund 1 to further digital health innovation. But second was also to make sure that our existing portfolio companies who have been working so hard get the additional support from our end. And as well as we continue innovating in more and more technologies that our network supports we get good support from our clinicians. So they would be opening, I think Blake and Kelly plan to open a funding round in the next few months, probably by the end of this year. And we are gearing up at our end that as soon as they're done, we can probably start looking at finalizing the term sheet.
Thank you. And I think my very, very last question is for Gary, for you. What do you know about Elucid and the landscape today that you wish you knew when you first invested?
That's a hard question with these guys because I've loved these guys from the day we started, and with the team, I have a very good understanding. Being, as an anesthesiologist, I certainly, understand the value of everything that they've created, as well as from a provider and patient perspective. So there's not a lot. I mean, they're the good example of what you should do when you're doing early due diligence. Great team, great technology, huge addressable market, and it also for us really, the importance of this particular technology, as we've talked about for the last hour now, is very significant for us. But not every investment you're going to make is going to have the same clinical significance as this. So I would say that if I were to look at Elucid now and know what I knew now early on, maybe I would have put twice as much money in at that point, but it wasn't an option for us, as Sheetal pointed out. But, the other nice thing about the network as it's grown for us is, remember, when we first started, we were a small, very small fund driven and funded by clinicians. And now, we've had a number of exits and we have more coming, like Elucid, and our second fund is much larger. So it's giving us the opportunity now to participate in companies from the first fund that have reached their milestones and are now much closer to some sort of also use an early idea generation investment opportunity to do that. So with fund two. So yeah, no, I congratulate them, and I congratulate us too. I pat ourselves on the back for being smart enough to make that investment early.
Thank you. And in closing, Blake, Kelly, what advice would you give to fellow health tech founders who are maybe are a few years behind, just starting out in the industry? What have you learned along the way? Maybe just one or two pieces of advice.
I'll just reiterate, we say it's all about the people, and that's very true, and we spend a lot of time on that. Secondly, if you have a great technology, you need to figure out who's going to pay for it and how it's going to save time and money in the healthcare system. Nobody's going to spend more time, pay more money, even if it's a better technology than what's there today. And then the third thing is focus on market access and regulatory and clinical. Those are areas where you need the been there, done that people that have been in the category and have the domain expertise.
Yeah, I have some overlap in what I thought of here as well. So have the right early investors. I know you don't always have a full choice, but hold out, find the right ones who align with your vision, your timelines, and what you're seeking to do so that you can all be rowing together. People think about reimbursement as an afterthought, as Kelly talked about. It is not an afterthought. It is the first thought. It is much harder to get reimbursement than it is to get regulatory clearance. And given the timelines in med device, it is challenging to think about, oh, well, let me test this out to get product market fit. I need to wait till I'm cleared. You need to get ahead of that. You're going to ultimately be building the wrong thing. So establishing that early as soon as you can, and there are various ways to do that ahead of regulatory, is incredibly important so that you're building the right thing for the right group that's using it. Just an example, you can be overly influenced by KOLs in a market who want certain features, but then if you go and launch it in the regular market, that's not what the active physicians are looking for, or maybe you're thinking about what the wrong call point wants. So having that as early as possible is always hugely beneficial.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we're almost at time. If you have any parting thoughts, please share. Otherwise, I really thank you very much for your time. It was incredibly informative, also very technical. So I feel like I have to watch the webinar one more time to get to some of the details. But
I think what I would say also is, that's the power of our network platform, right? So we do have an Elucid community in the network. Our investors and interested investors have access to that community, and they can always post questions to the GPs, and we can forward them on to the company.
thank you. Thank you very much. Have a great start to the week. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks.
Thanks
You
all.
Bye.
Take care.
Great to see you, Blake. Great to see you,
You
Kat.
as well, Gary. Bye.
Thank you.